Hello and welcome to Galata Plus. In this episode, we're going to be talking about K.G.F. Chapter 2, written and directed by Prashanth Neel and starring Yash as a gold-hearted gangster named Rocky. But first, let's have a recap. The first chapter told the story, a Diwar-like story of a young boy going to Bombay and becoming a gangster. And then he goes to Karnataka, rather he is sent to Karnataka and he becomes someone even more famous, even bigger. He becomes a messiah of the people of a secret mining town called K.G.F. And we met a number of characters who return in this film as well. We met Shetty Bhai from Bombay, we met Inayat Khalil from Dubai, and we met the Prime Minister of India, a woman whose face is not revealed, but she keeps talking about how Rocky is the most dangerous criminal in India, and she says she's going to sign a death warrant against him and she unleashes the army against him. But the film began with a television anchor played by Malavika Avinash, and she listens to the KGF story as narrated by a senior journalist played by Anant Nag, and that is the framing device that is used in this film as well. There are just two small changes. One is the narrator is no longer Anant Nag but Anant Nag's son played by Prakash Raj, and secondly Malavika Avinash after KGF 1 is much more invested in the story. She is no longer as cynical as she was back then. She really wants to get to the root of the Rocky story. I did not realize something about this framing device when I saw chapter 1, but now I realize that it is two things. One is it is a breather between the hectically placed events. Every time you come back to the television room where this interrogation is happening between Malavika Avinash and Anant Nag or Malavika Avinash and Prakash Raj, you get a bit of a breather. And secondly, it's a bit of spoon feeding for the audience because the story is so deep and dense. Actually, let me correct that. Actually, it's a narrative that's deep and dense. The storyline is fairly simple, it's fairly straightforward, but the narrative is deep and dense, and I will come back to this later. So what does chapter 2 have in store for Rocky? He is still worshipped by his people, he still cares for them, but there's something driving him, something internal. He says the mining for gold should go on day and night. The work should not stop, he says. And you wonder why, and the answer lies in the opening and the closing. In the opening, you get a mother narrate a bedtime story to a son, and in the closing, you get a very powerful image that is almost bordering on the mythical. So watch the first scene carefully because it really pays off in the last or almost last scenes where, again, I can't tell you. And in between this opening and this closing, that is the mother with the bedtime story and the closing images, we get a film that works at two levels. One, we get a huge action spectacle with very inventive set pieces, superbly shot by Bhuvan Gowda in darker tones that indicate that we are watching a darker sequel. And two, we get a style-filled masala movie filled with whistle-worthy dialogue and scene after scene with twists and surprises for the audience. In chapter 2, Rocky gets two new enemies. One is the Prime Minister, whose face is finally revealed. She's played by Ravina Tandon, and two is a Viking-like brute played by Sanjay Dutt. Sanjay Dutt is terrific in this role, and his introduction scene on a burning bridge is one of the film's many epic highlights. In fact, almost every second of this film is epic. Yash is wonderfully epic and larger than life. The dialogues are epic. Ravi Basu'S score is epic, and the action is epic, especially a high-speed car chase where instead of fading to black, which is usual, we keep getting sharp cuts to a black screen. This creates a very bizarre kind of rhythm to the whole epic action scene. But that is why I wished for some quiet, intimate moments between Yash and Srinidhi Shetty, who plays his love interest. We get an epic moment involving a helicopter, but no real idea about what their relationship is all about. Their great romance, if it is one, does not register at all. And the second issue I had with the movie was that the criminal mastermind behind all these events, his reveal happens very, very hastily. But that apart, I had no complaints at all, and now we can talk about the narrative being deep and dense. In part 1, a combination of the fast cutting and the slow motion sequences, it created a kind of a stylized effect. We get some of that in chapter 2 as well, but Prashanth really pushes himself as a screenwriter, and he really pushes his editor Ujjwal Kulkarni to the extent that every sequence plays, or rather has the feel of the legendary baptism stretch from The Godfather, the very first Godfather. The visuals come at us really fast, but this is not the usual hyperkinetic editing for an attention deficit audience. This is a carefully planned stylization. So take the sequence where Ravina Tandon is sworn as Prime Minister. So we get her reading a line or two of the oath of allegiance, right? I will do this, etc. And then suddenly we cut to her barking orders to sack the Home Minister, and then suddenly we return to her continuing the oath that she's reading out. That is the swearing in ceremony. So there is a sense of playing with time. We see her in the present, we cut to her actions in the future, and then we are back in the present. There is also a sense of playing with geography because these two events, that is the swearing in and the other thing she does in the future, they happen in different locations. This happens again and again and again. We see a no confidence motion being passed in the parliament, and then we cut to a shootout, and then we were back to this, and then we go back to that. Or take this stretch, Rocky's wife has a bad dream, she begins to narrate about it, and then we cut to a major action sequence, and then we return to this dream being narrated. The last line of this dream being narrated is one of the most emotional moments of K.G.F 2, along with the opening and closing images that I talked about earlier. So the one thing that I wished was we had more of an emotional connect with the characters, but actually I didn't mind at all because this is such a spectacle. The action and the masala flavor and the precision of the cuts are fantastic. And even if the story arc feels familiar from a linear point of view, if you look back at the film and work out the events logically in a linear point of view, the denseness of the narrative and the denseness of the editing screenplay that I just told you about, that makes it all seem fresh and new. K.G.F Chapter 2 is a vast improvement on its predecessor. It is an epic ×2. So that's it about K.G.F 2. If you like this video, do subscribe to Galata Plus and see you soon at the movies.